Welcome to the Mighty Emotions Podcast. I'm your host, Giselle. I'm a certified emotions coach, and I teach you how to respond better to your emotions so you can feel better in your life. My mission is to show you how to work with your emotions to become more emotionally resilient. Your emotions are not designed to overpower you, they're designed to empower you. On this podcast, I share what our emotions are, how to understand them and work with them, and the tools you need to reclaim your power and get unstuck from emotional pain so you can find fulfillment in your life again. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's get into the episode. Hello again, beautiful souls. Welcome back to another episode. How are you doing? How's your life? What are you feeling in this moment? What are you feeling today? What were you feeling yesterday? I hope you listened to last week's episode and that you started to reflect more on getting specific and what are you feeling and tapping into your body and what have you kind of done for that? Like, what have you been doing? The exercises I gave you in the episode. If you haven't listened, you can go back after this and listen to episode 26. Episode about or 27. Oh my gosh, I should know this. The episode about emotional health. Go back and listen to last week's episode if you haven't yet. And yeah, what are you feeling? In my life, I am just, again, I said last week I was so grateful for my marriage and my husband. I'm also grateful for my little one who just turned 2. And just to be a mother today is just a dream I didn't even know was a dream, and I had to admit to myself was a dream, and now for it to be real. Life is so generous and it is so beautiful. And if your brain is saying no to that statement right now, I want you to subscribe to this podcast because I know what it's like to be there. I know what it's like to only have kind of negative reinforcement to, any other narrative and be like, no, that's not been true for me. That's not my reality. So it's not real. It's absolutely a reality that's available to all of us, right? I like the idea of quantum physics and parallel universes because it just makes so much sense to me. And this actually has nothing to do with the episode, but it might tie in later about thinking about a parallel universe, like thinking about parallel timelines happening to you. There's a version of you on another timeline right now who has a worse life than you, and there's a version of you right now who has a better life than you, always in parallel. I think about that a lot, and it's so helpful for me because as I move forward in my life and I have dreams and goals that I want to achieve, I think about who I need to become to achieve those goals. And I think, there's a version of me that already is that. There's a version of me that already exists that is that. What would she be doing right now? And it just gets you to play with imagination. And imagination is so powerful. Like, we are creatures created. We can imagine things. We can dream things. We can visualize things and create things. Like, let's not let that skill go to waste, right? So that's a tangent, but yeah, celebrating being a mother and having an amazing daughter and having to do, move through all of the healing work, all the stories that came up to be released around that. And we're going to talk about stories being released today because it's still the beginning of the new year. We're still in the new year, new me energy. We're still going for our goals. And, it's kind of the cycle. Everyone knows the beginning of the year, you go real hard and then you kind of doze off, which is exactly why with the work that I do in my coaching, even in my membership, my upcoming membership, it is gradual. It is incremental. It is building one on top of the other. It cannot be go super hard at the beginning and burn out. That is not going to lead to sustainable change. It's not going to lead to long lasting change. So really, even though that's kind of the energy, I hope that you give yourself grace. And I want to talk today about self-sabotage because I think it plays into that, right? We think like, oh, why am I sabotaging myself? Why am I doing this thing even though I know that it's not the ideal thing? And what's that all about? Well, I'm here to tell you that self-sabotage is like emotional resilience, really misunderstood societally, right? When we talk about self-sabotage, We talk about it as though like we're trying to harm ourselves, or, why are we interrupting our own progress? And actually, self sabotage is a form of energy preservation. Self sabotage is us trying to take care of ourselves because we've gone too far in one direction without doing the foundational work. That's why the work that I do is incremental, like I said, because it builds a foundation that's solid, right? When the foundation is built and the foundation is solid, everything else is just maintenance. It's upkeep, it's practice, right? If you try to build a house and you don't build the foundation first, it will fall, it will crumble. And so when we're creating these goals, we're going for these new habits, self sabotage can crop up as a way of us preserving our energy, as a way, a built-in way that we're actually trying to be kind to ourselves and take care of ourselves, right? And it could, you're saying like, what? I want to be fit, but I'm just lazy. I'm schlubbing here. I'm eating this crap, right? I'm not working out. I know I should be working out, but it's just easier to lay here and not do anything. Self-sabotaging myself. And we judge ourselves for it. And it's because acting on willpower alone takes a great deal of energy. We're using so much energy when that energy is external, when that energy is based on something that doesn't have a foundation. All of our behaviors, all of our results are byproducts of what's already been going on within us. And so going back to my little tangent about imagination, right? It's about building the identity within our imagination, seeing ourselves as the person that does the thing, and then our body naturally follows. Our body naturally carries out that action. We naturally align with and attract and co-create the scenario easily because it's not willpower. Willpower is forcing and pushing and going. But when we're doing the emotional resilience work, we're dealing with all the internal stories and narrative, and we're dealing with that internal resistance, right? The resistance that eventually comes up when we can't push through on willpower alone. There's an amazing book on autosuggestion by Amy Couillet, and I believe the founder of autosuggestion. And I highly recommend you look for the book and read it. Um, it is so powerful to think about what our minds create. Again, the stories that our minds create and how it leads to behavior. And we often think we can change our internal stories by changing our behavior. And all we do is burn through our fuel, burn through our energy, and end up exhausted and depleted. So that's not the way that it necessarily works, right? The way that it works is that we do the work internally first. We look at those internal stories. We look at the things that we're telling ourselves, and we create new stories. We replace those stories with new ones that serve us, ones that benefit us. And that's why I like to think about parallel universes, because when I do that, I think there's already a me out there in the multiverse that is doing this thing that I want to do. How does she think? What is she thinking right now? How does her life look right now? And playing with that imagination allows me to kind of copy that in my present life. And it lets me feel like I'm connected to that and take on that identity. Our identities are something that we create. We create our identity, right? It's not fixed. It's always changing. It's ever changing. 2 years ago, I wasn't a mom. That wasn't my identity. I didn't have a child. Now I am a mom. That's a new identity that I've taken on. And how that identity plays out is going to be my choosing. What kind of mom do I want to be? What are the characteristics of this identity that I'm taking on? Those are all choices that I get to actively make, that you get to actively make in your life. A lot of time we feel like this is just who I am, and we think that we're powerless over it, and that could not be further from the truth. You absolutely have power. You absolutely are creating and reinforcing your identity all the time. Now, caveat, there are times that we take the behavior before we believe it, and the behavior allows us to change our self-image. But again, that's only if it's done incrementally. That's only if we're doing it a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. So we're not overwhelming our system. So we're not going from 0 to 100. So we're not going from this person to that person in one day. I can tell you right now, when you have an identity transition that's like that, like becoming a mother, it's it's life altering. Okay. Changing our identity should be gradual. It should be gradual and intentional. When you go from going to bed one day without a baby and waking up the next day with a baby, it's mind blowing. It's wild to try to regulate and come into a state of accepting your new reality, your new identity. So it's got to be done slowly. It's got to be done gently so that we don't burn out, right? And so that we don't sabotage ourselves. Because when we are using up too much energy, we're going to actively engage in self sabotage. We're going to fall into these old patterns that align with our identity, right? We're going to fall into these patterns that align with our internal beliefs and our subconscious stories because there's a mismatch, there's a gap, and the gap is too wide. And we tried to close the gap too quickly, right? I tried to go from this person to that person in 5 seconds. And it really is so much more intentional. It needs to be so much more intentional for it to really be effective, right? So it's about recognizing that if that self sabotage is happening, we need to slow down and we need to, yes, look at where we want to go, but see how we're going to get there little by little. What's the little shift I'm going to make today? What's the little shift I'm going to make next week? What's the little shift I'm going to make in a month? Not, I'm going to do all this right now. And then beyond that, in parallel to that, what is the identity of the person that has this thing? What is the identity of the person that gets up and works out every morning? What does that person think? Why does that person do it? Why are they motivated to do it? Understanding that and asking ourselves those questions is so important because when our internal state is in alignment with what we want, then the external behaviors are just going to follow naturally. It's just going to be smooth. It's going to be a process that we're not forcing, that we're not, trying, we're not hurting ourselves. If you want to run a marathon, and unfortunately, my husband has, as 1 year for his birthday, he wanted to run a half marathon, 5 a.m. in the morning. I'm like, I don't see myself as a marathon runner. And I'll tell you, I walked for half of it or most of it. And it was beautiful. It's a beautiful location. But the point is that like training for that, we had to kind of train for that because I wasn't running before. And you don't just start running 20 kilometers the first day. It is a process. It is gradual. It is strengthening your body little by little and strengthening your self-image little by little should you choose that. Like I didn't choose to look at myself as a runner. But if I wanted to, every time that I went for a run and came back from that run, that would be a way to enforce that self-image of, oh, I'm a runner. I just ran today and I'm going to run tomorrow. And even though I didn't run 10 kilometers, I ran, right? And enforcing that self-image, super important. It's a gradual process. I did not feel like a mother on the first day. I wasn't feeling like I'm a mom now just because I had this baby, right? It was really gradual. I don't think I felt like a mom until she was, I don't know, like 8 months, 9 months old. And that was me just intentionally doing this work and showing up and checking in with myself and doing my emotional resilience practice as these stories came up and these emotions came up with them and making deliberate choices about releasing them and what were the new ones that I was going to choose and what is the identity that I'm creating here as a mom. But it did not happen on day one. It did not happen just because I had a baby in my arms, right? It was so gradual for me to really take on that identity and see you're doing these things that you associate with being a mother. And now you're slowly building that identity, that self-image to the point where I can see myself as a mom. And then the next thing I had to do was see myself as a good mom, which I do, right? Because I've defined what that is and I carry out that action every day in align with those values, the values that I chose, not the values that society wanted to give me, right? The values that I chose. So if we want to avoid self-sabotage, if we want to actually achieve our goals, we have to see where our energy is being put and we have to be mindful that the internal work has to happen as well. It can't just be this external focus on doing, doing, doing. It's who are we being and becoming that does those things. And we'll notice, what my clients notice is that gradually, because it's little by little, it's gentle, it's gradual, it doesn't even feel like work. And then weeks into it, they are different people and they're shocked at how they're responding to things differently and they feel different about themselves. And it's because there was no room for self-sabotage because you weren't exerting all this energy to become somebody completely different. That wasn't where your focus was. Your focus is on little, different, small but mighty, small but potent actions each and every week, right? It's a gradual, it's an incremental process. And then that self-preservation system of self-sabotage doesn't have to kick in to conserve our energy because we're not exerting it unnecessarily. So my encouragement to you is to look at how you're using your energy. Does it feel like you're forcing or rushing or pushing? Or does it feel more gradual? Does it feel more gentle? You can still work towards those goals, but how are you working towards them? Are you just focused on the external stuff, or are you focused on building that self-image and that identity internally and dealing with the emotions that come up as you move through that? Because let me tell you, becoming a new person, right? And we're always going through our transitions, right? We go through childhood to adolescence, adolescence to adulthood. We're always going to be moving through these transitions. So when we can move through them intentionally, becoming another person is really, it's a choice that we're making. It's an active choice that we're making little by little. Like, we're looking at ourselves and we're saying, is this me? Is this what I want? Is this, and there are stories that we've collected up until now that are going to conflict with who we want to be. And there are stories that we've collected and we've absorbed up until now in our subconscious that need to come up, that need to be released because they don't align with the person we're becoming. They don't align with where we're going, right? And that is an uncomfortable process when we're beginning. So I just want you to get mindful about that process. I want you to get mindful about when that discomfort, that friction, that self-sabotage is arising, and recognize it as a way that you're trying to take care of yourself, and recognize it as a signal to slow down. Whatever you're doing, just slow down and shift the way you're moving towards that goal, or shift the way you're moving towards, whatever that dream is that you're having. Or if you weren't even conscious that you were moving through an identity transition, to get intentional with looking at what has gone on. Where have you been? Where are you going? Where are you now? That's different. And what are the mismatched stories or the mixed messages or the conflicting narratives within you, right? If today you live in a beautiful home, and I mean, I can speak for myself. Today I live in a beautiful home and I used to be homeless on the street. And as I was moving towards this new way of living, not just, not only just having a roof over my head, because it was gradual. I had to have a roof over my head, and then I had to have a nice roof over my head. Then I had to have a safe roof over my head. And making that identity shift into seeing myself as the person who has that took years. It took a really long time. I lived in some really awful, awful places when I got off the street. I did not value home. I just saw it as a roof over my head. And it took a really long time for me to say, I get to create my home. I get to make this, I get to decide what home is for me and what I need in a home. And I get to be deliberate and intentional about that. And I get to be the person that has that. And I had to release the narratives that I had about myself coming from where I came from. That's not who I am anymore. It's not who I'm becoming. And I'm going through another version of that in my life today. And we're always going through these versions, but it's about, can we go through it intentionally? Can we go through it really present and mindful and aware, and intentionally and deliberately choose how we're responding as the stories come up, as the emotions come up? All of us have this ability. You just need to practice, practice, and practice. And it's ongoing. But it's the most important skill that we can give ourselves in this life is emotional resilience, because that's what's going to help us get the things that we want. It's going to help us take care of ourselves. It's going to help us elevate and grow. It's going to help us avoid self-sabotage, right? So with that, I hope that you took something out of this episode. Let me know if you are struggling with self-sabotage. Let me know if you start to seeing if you're seeing this in a different way, if the wheels are turning and the gears are turning in the brain. What do you think about what I'm sharing? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I would love to know what your experience has been with it. And if this resonates with you, please leave a review and message me on Instagram at mighty_emotions. I cannot wait for you guys to experience the membership I'm building. It is going to be phenomenal. It's going to help so many people learn, the steps to becoming emotionally resilient and find their inner power and just shift their identity, right? Gradually and gently and softly, but the end result is so beautiful when you can look back and see how far you've come and see how much stronger you are. So I can't wait for this to be released to the world. I'm sorry to tease you guys. I don't have a date for releasing it yet, but I'm going to keep mentioning it to you, putting it out in the universe. It's all coming together soon, and I can't wait to see you inside the membership. Thank you so much for listening to another episode and spending this time with me. I am wishing you love, love, love on your journey. Be gentle with yourself. I'll see you next week. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. It would mean so much if you could subscribe, leave a review, share with your friends and family, and let me know what you think by going to my Instagram at mighty_emotions and connecting with me and letting me know what you loved about today's episode. It really means a lot that you support this podcast, and I love coming to you each week with a new episode. So be sure to subscribe, let me know what you think, and take care of yourself.